Have you often wondered what it was like to sit in the audience where Jesus spoke? Well, when he spoke, each person in that audience felt like he was speaking directly to them. They listened to every word because he didn't speak to them in a condescending manner. He spoke to them as a friend. Each person smiled when he smiled and related to things that he spoke about because he lived their lives. He wasn't someone who came on a throne expecting people to be a slave to him. Instead, he became everyone's Jesus. When he spoke, the women swooned and smiled because he gave them worth. He gave them value, which they never had before. He taught them about God, a thing that no one as a woman ever experienced. He spoke to the men on their level, but with a different type of attitude. He is never harsh unless he had to be. When he spoke to children, he spoke to each little child as it also had worth. Because back in those days, women and children really had no value as we do today. A little girl, for example, could often go unnoticed, whereas a little boy was going to be trained to be someone important. But he didn't treat people like that. And they came and they followed him for miles just to get a glimpse of him and hope that he would turn and say something to them. He was and is amazing. Someone asked, why did he become so controversial? Jesus became controversial because religions made him to be that way. We hear of God's mercy and forgiveness, but he didn't come teaching that way. When he spoke to people, those things they felt, they didn't have to be told. They watched him laugh. They watched him play games. They watched him look at children in such a way that it touched the very core of each person. Jesus was magnetic. He drew people to him. Not important people as such, but the people that were often forgotten. He made them feel important. He was a young man. So a young man of 28 years old, when he came back into town from living apart from his own culture, had hopes and dreams too. Yes, of course, he had a mission. But being a young man and being human only would lead to what every other young man would dream of. And that's a wife and family. Yes, of course, he had a mission. But if for a moment you remember that you were taught that Jesus was human in every way, except he did not sin, then why is it so hard to understand that he would fall in love, get married, and wish for children? No, he didn't have children because that wasn't part of the mission. But when he looked at children, you can only imagine as a young man how he hoped that he could. When he said, let the children come to me, he really, in every sense of the word, enjoyed watching them and watching them be silly. They didn't all just kneel there and pray. Half the people that met up with Jesus didn't see him as a religious teacher, yet he was. They didn't see him as God as we see him, because it was a very new phenomenon that they were being introduced to. But they did see the likeness of God. They saw the characteristics, the demeanor, the kindness, the love of God, which they weren't shown. God wasn't teaching with fire and brimstone and punishment, and he was teaching about love. He was teaching about kindness. He was different. No one who heard him was not captivated by the way he spoke, the little things he would say and do, the funny jokes he would make. He made jokes. He laughed. He used his daily life as examples of what God would want from a decent man. As husband, as teacher. And if you think that's so strange, you have to check further back and realize that, did you know the high priests of the time all had to be married? All the rabbis had to be married. Why wouldn't Jesus be married? Why did he get married, aside from falling in love? To show what a marriage is truly about. How you lean on each other and how important that love is. That you become one person, that you can finish the words of your wife or your husband. You know what they're going to think before they even share it with you. To a lot of people, this sounds scandalous because you were told it was scandalous. You were told that this was wrong. To imagine that Jesus could ever be married, but that unknown knowledge is what makes Jesus so controversial today. Who could relate to him? Who could really relate to Jesus today? Ephesians feel that it's important for people to understand how much was omitted from what you were taught. Because having the whole Jesus is very important. As a woman, don't you ever wonder about him? How, if you were there, how he would treat you and talk to you. There is no possible right that any religion has to keep a woman from loving her Jesus. There's no possible excuse that they can't share in all that he brought with him. So often I've heard, and this is crazy for 2019, that a woman was told that unless she goes through her husband, she has no connection with God. Who teaches that? Who in the world would believe that Jesus would discriminate? It just doesn't make sense. Jesus came to make a change, to break away from the old ways, to give women worth, to show them that all are equal. Each has a role, of course, but all are equal, and that changes everyone's perspective when you as a woman are trying to raise children on your own with little income, and yet you teach them to love Jesus. The many miracles that you perform throughout the day, trying to make ends meet and thanking God at the end of the day for helping you make it through the day. Or to have a shoulder to cry on. Or to laugh. Jesus is still very much alive today. He isn't a figment of someone's imagination. Too often we hear, is the historical Jesus the same as the one that taught back then? Historical meaning what people have found out today, versus the sacramental Jesus. And these were questions that really should have been answered over the years. To show how God, second person, became a man to right the wrongs, not to persist in those things that hurt someone. He never judged anyone. All were welcome to come and hear him. He wasn't bound by any law because he was the author of law. Even though people didn't need to know those types of things, they knew there was something about this person. Something good. Something that would change their lives forever. This person, Jesus, was not just talking the talk, but in so many ways displayed by his own personal life the truth in all the things he did teach. Well, there's a lot of people who think that anything outside of what they've been told for over 2,000 years is heresy. Maybe you should start thinking about those things that you weren't told. Wouldn't it make more sense to the questions, how would Jesus know about a marriage if he was never married? Women depend on Jesus throughout the day and in their lives. They defend everything about him. This is not a teaching on the weakness of the men. It's a teaching on how he made women feel. That they have a natural connection with him. When men heard him speak, it didn't matter to Jesus if they were tax collectors or they owned a tavern. It didn't matter who they were. He treated them equally. But he was no fool either. And he didn't want anyone else to be fools. That's what made him that much special. You don't have to be dragged down and trampled on. He made everyone feel special. That's all most people want. Take that away and he's controversial. You could go against any religion and they will find a reason why he is not God. But few could say that he was not kind and loving. Jesus made it a point to give the example of how to live according to what God wanted. And that was only the beginning. The rest, you'll find out in other lessons. Right now, just understand that He's there for you, whether you're a man, a woman, or a child. That as a woman on your own, you have Jesus to lean on. Don't let anyone treat you differently. Don't let them take away your worth. I have seen that. I have experienced that. Blessed is the man who sees you as an equal and shares in the gifts that God gives you. If you have a boss, a husband, someone who, as a man, sees that, he's a treasure. And they are around. I often hear women talk about their husbands to do anything for them. Few are those men who treat you differently. And believe me, they're not worth working for. They're not worth it. God gave you gifts. Use them. Be strong. But more importantly, know that you have a shoulder. Know that Jesus is there and He understands. I know there is a lot in what I said. Again, we'll break it down accordingly. But as an Ishan and the foundress of the Ishan religion, we're not frightening people. We're not taking away Jesus from anyone. We are giving you who He really is and what He really taught. That today it's more spiritual than religion. There's a spirituality that surrounds people who love God or believe that there's a higher being versus religions who seem to divide people. Be spiritual. Find your center in kindness and love. Find your heart in Jesus. Thank you.